video I'm going to talk about the evolution, we shall say, and revolution of Mitsubishi Motors Australia. You see, Mitsubishi has been bringing cars here since the 1960s and 70s, but they were badged as Chryslers. Mitsubishi was actually known as a company as Mitsubishi Motors in Australia in 1981, even though we'd had Sigmas and Galants for the last 10 years before that. So they came here buying out the remains of Chrysler Australia and their factory in Tonsley Park and their engine factory in Lonsdale, South Australia, to locally build the Sigma. And the Sigma was produced in Australia between 1981 and 1986. But the Sigma was replaced by a car called the Magna. Now, what the Magna was an 83 Mitsubishi Sigma, but with body widened by an extra 6 inches. Now, this is the car that started the wide body mid-size phenomena. The Camry, the 1992 Toyota Camry that took the US market by storm, well, this is the car that it copied. The 1985 TM Mitsubishi Magna. The thing that made the Magna so good was that it was about as wide as a Commodore or a Falcon, and it was powered by 4-cylinder, so you had all the benefits of the economy of a 4-cylinder engine and all the size of a 6-cylinder, which was a winning formula for Mitsubishi. The Magna was a car that was long-lived, but the other thing you need to realise with the Magna was it took all the know-how Mitsubishi had with Sigma, all the know-how the Chrysler Australia guys had from the sale of all the Valiants they were making, that people wanted a wide car, people wanted something big, but in Mitsubishi they wanted a big car that would deal with better fuel economy. So it was aimed at stuff like the Camry, or the Crown, the forerunner to the Camry, and the Datsun Bluebird. And the Camry and Bluebird were 4-cylinder cars, but they weren't very big. So the Magna addressed this and offered better fuel economy than the equivalent 6-cylinder Commodore and Falcon in 1987 and in 1989, as the TN from 87 to 89 and the TP from 89 to 1991. So the TN was mildly updated. You still had the carburetor-driven Astron 2. Now the TN Magna also was, like the original TM, had unleaded fuel from 86 onwards. So 85 TMs had leaded fuel and 86 onwards had unleaded fuel. Now the TN and TP Magnas again carried the ECI Multi, the updated Astron engine with fuel injection, or the standard carburetor Astron for the base cars, offered with 4-speed automatic and 5-speed manual transmissions. Now, the other thing was, you notice with these later Magnas, they became more and more luxurious. So you used to get digital dials on the Elite, and climate control on from the TN onwards, and you also had controls on the steering wheel. They were very, very much cars that were very highly equipped for the money you were paying back in the day. But the Magna was starting to look a bit long in the tooth by 1990. The Camry had been updated in 87, and had also been updated in 1990 with a twin-cam 2-litre engine. That was proving to be close to the Mitsubishi on performance for only 2 litres. So Mitsubishi also needed to get a car that would close the gap on the Commodore and the Falcon, because the Commodore and Falcon had been updated in 1988 with the VN and EA respectively, and they were bigger than their previous cars. So Mitsubishi needed to create a Magna that would not only have the power of a 4-cylinder engine to keep up with the Camry and charge after Camry buyers, but produce a car that would be able to challenge the Holden and the Ford toe-to-toe with a 6-cylinder engine. And that's what came in 1991 with the TR Magna. The TR Mitsubishi Magna had both the 2.6-litre inline-4 and the 3-litre Cyclone V6. Again, 4-speed automatic and 5-speed manual rear transmission options. And again, it went from a whole range of cars, from a base executive that was aimed solely at fleets and rental car companies, and for those on a budget, to the high-end Veratas, which was the more luxurious variant, and Elites, which was the highest of the Magna trims, because the Verata had become its own model. The TR was facelifted in 1994 to the TS Magna again, minor changes here and there, but also the fact that this car was actually coming equipped with a driver's airbag, which these car, Magna was one of the later cars to come in the Australian car industry to have driver's airbag even as an option, because when Holden came in 1993 with the VR Commodore, the driver's airbag was standard on the Acclaim and also the Calais, which was the first for an Australian car. Ford copied that in 94 with the Falcon EF getting an airbag, and same with Toyota in 93 with the Camry getting an airbag as well. But again, this was later in the year. The early Camrys had come with an airbag even as an option. So Mitsubishi had to put an airbag in to keep up with their Australian competitors. After all, the four big Australian cars all competed with each other in a game of one-upmanship. So if one car had it, the others were all going to get it. There was always a game in the Australian car industry. The technical one-upmanship between all four cars and all four manufacturers was something that the buyers would attract buyers. These four cars were the best-selling cars in Australia at the time. And that's ultimately why it mattered so much, because these were the cars people were buying at the time. There was no SUVs to buy. Full drives were big agricultural things like Patrols, Land Cruisers, Pajeros. And if you wanted a car that carried people in to drive on the roads and didn't need the full drive capabilities or the price of those cars, you were buying a Falcon, a Commodore, a Magna, or a Camry. Magna TS lasted until 1996, where it was then updated to the TE Magna. Now the TE Magna was again a Mitsubishi from Japan, like the TRTS, which were the Diamantes, but again similar design to the Diamantes, only these were slightly wider. And like their forebears, like the T from the TP onwards, that they were being exported, TEs were exported to America as Mitsubishi Diamantes. So the export cars to North America for the wagon, and for the TRTS wagons, they were built in Tonsley, as were the cars built from TE onwards to North America. They were built in Tonsley. By 1996, the tide had turned in terms of the power plants for the Magna. The four-cylinder Magna was a bit on the nose. So during the TR and TS variants, the 6s were starting to outsell the 4s, and the 6 became the more popular engine to have, more desirable second-hand, and crucially, you didn't pay that much more. It was only about $1,000 to $1,500 per model to get the 6-cylinder engine. Many buyers went for the 6-cylinder engine. And the base executive, it was closer to 2, but again, people wanted the bigger engine, people wanted the extra power. So the TE got a 4-cylinder, but it was dropped quietly when they updated the TE Magna to the TF Magna in December 1998. So the 4 became undesirable. By this time it was the 4G64, the same engine in the car that I'm driving now, the Outlander, and the 4-cylinder had become on the nose. By this time, Mitsubishi were trying to absolutely find new ways of trying to make Holden and Ford and Toyota look like they were producing cars that were nowhere near as sophisticated as the Magna. So the Magna had so many different things that others adopted. First and foremost, the sequential sport shift automatic transmission. For an Australian car, the Magna was the first car to have it. And that came in 1998 with the Magna Sports with a V6 engine, and Mitsubishi doing an ad where someone is driving a Magna Sports trying to keep up with a Porsche 911. So once the TF Magna was launched in 1998, the end of 98, the Magna was starting to lag behind the Holden and the Ford. After all, the VT and the AU had been out, AU coming out in 98 in the Falcon, and the VT and the Commodore in 97. The Magna was starting to look very much an older car and a bit of an also-ran. It started to slip off during this period of time, sales-wise, and Mitsubishi were trying their best to sell them. They were trying to crow about the Magna being a more refined car, a much nicer car to drive. And while the Magna was a good car, the 3-litre Cyclone V6 was outmodded by the updated Ecotec V6 in the Holden and the updated 4-litre inline 6 in the Falcon. It was sort of in between the Camry and the base Holden and Ford. But the wheels started to come off for the Magna, and this was about the time Mitsubishi started talking about closing manufacturing in Australia. So for a very long time, I can always remember there being some sort of news story about Mitsubishi thinking about closing the plants at Tonsley and Lonsdale. They ended up closing Lonsdale in 2005 and Tonsley in 2008, but not before the Magna had run its course. The Magna was updated to TJ in 2002, and in 2001 there was a Series 2, and in 2002 there was a Series 3. They were trying to update these cars, they were trying to make them more competitive, but they needed a new car. Final TL Magna of 2003 was a good car, but it needed to come 2 or 3 years earlier to really put a dent on the Holden and the Ford. Ultimately, Mitsubishi had to come out with a car that would keep up with the Commodore and the Falcon, and they made this out of the plans for the 2004 model year Galant. A car called the 380. It was wider than the equivalent Galant. It was designed with a suspension tune for Australia, and again it was made to keep up with the base Holden and base Ford. The base 380 was one they had to get right. They needed something that would hit the base car buyer of a base Holden 4 or Ford 6. Trouble is, in 2002 the market started to shift. Not that long after the 380's design was finalised, the market started shifting to SUVs. Stuff like this Outlander that came out in the start of 2003 really started to dent the sales of the Magna. This car here made a lot of people who once bought 4-cylinder Magna wagons and Sigmas get a car that was what they wanted, something that wasn't so big and bulky and aimed at Holden or Ford. They wanted a smaller car that was a bit more economical, and that's what this Outlander did so well. That's why these sold so well. That's why these things moved and Magnas didn't. Mitsubishi were discounting Magnas, car after car, massive discounts off. They were offering a 5-year unlimited kilometre warranty and with a 10-year powertrain warranty. And it was, again, they had the ad, better built, better backed. They were trying to show that this car was built very well, and it was, if you ignore the saggy headliner and sometimes crappy paint. Mechanically, Magnas of this vintage were very strong, but unfortunately it wasn't enough. The 380 sales, what used to be a sale figure of 5, 6, 7, 8,000 a month, only 6 years earlier was 700 a month. Mitsubishi couldn't move them, and the 380, as good as it was, just didn't appeal to the different buyers that it was launched into. The people that they were aiming it at suddenly changed their mind on what they wanted, and what they wanted was an SUV. So Outlanders were selling, and unfortunately it spelt the end of Mitsubishi Australia's manufacturing. But I keep thinking this as I drive this car. What if Mitsubishi built this in Australia? What if they built Outlanders in Tonsley and their engines in Lonsdale? Would we still have a car industry? Would we, as Australian people, have bought these in even greater quantities than we originally did? It's something that I always think about when I drive this car. If this was built in Australia by someone who lived in the southern part of Adelaide, went to work and assembled this car, would this have become the best-selling car in Australia? I mean, Holden Cruisers only really sold here because they were built here. Cruisers are unreliable piles of junk. They have many problems, but people bought them because they were locally built, and they were supporting the local industry at the bottom end of the market for what those cars were, and they weren't very good. Now, the Outlander was a much better car, even when it was launched, it was a better car than the Cruiser. Would building an SUV have made a difference in Australia? Well, there's something to think about. Mitsubishi made great cars in Australia. Mitsubishi did a fantastic job with the cars, with the designs they worked with what they did in terms of engineering. Very forward-thinking company when it came to engineering. And these cars, they made them better. People copied their designs, and it became a genre of car. The wide-body mid-size is only due to the work done by the ex-Chrysler Australia boys at Mitsubishi. And that's why it's really sad to see that these companies that once made forward-thinking designs are designing cars that look like they've come out of a cookie cutter. Something to think about, that, isn't it?